Hello, and welcome to this month's Living with Parkinson's Meetup. I'm Chris Kruger, Program Manager for Educational Content with the Davis Phinney Foundation. And like our panelists, I live with Parkinson's. I was diagnosed in March of 2020. I'm really glad to be here with everybody today, so thanks for joining us. So I'd like to ask the panelists to go ahead and introduce themselves, and I'll go around one at a time. And panelists, when you introduce yourself, since we're going to talk about mood changes, maybe just give a quick soundbite about a mood change that you experience. Maybe it's maybe you feel oscillations between being a peaceful, calm feeling and sort of hyper stressed, or maybe you feel a transition often between sadness and a general good cheer, and that happens more regularly now than it did when you before you were living with Parkinson's. So just go ahead and talk about any mood changes you might have had experience with since living with Parkinson's. And I guess I'll start with Doug today.
Hi, everyone. Doug Reed from Lafayette, Colorado. I was diagnosed in 2010 when I was 36 and had DBS in the fall of 2019. Mood changes. I fluctuate between sadness and happiness. And when the sadness comes in, I try and focus on the positive side of things, and that brings me out of the mood. It's something I've been working on with my therapist, and so far, so good.
Great. Well, thanks, Doug. Glad you're here with us today. And I'll go to Shan next.
I am Shan Havens. I am gonna zoom in really dramatically first. Um, I'm in Idaho Falls, Idaho, and I was diagnosed early 2023. Um, and I think that my biggest mood related symptom is emotional dysregulation. And sometimes maybe that's just having an emotional reaction faster than I would normally. And sometimes it's just like to things I wouldn't normally react to, like watching a movie or a commercial or something silly that shouldn't get me real worked up, but does. I will say too, help with that is often just controlling my environment, right? I don't watch emotionally charged things if I can avoid it. I'm not going to watch a horror flick or something that's going to get me really emotionally dysregulated. I can control my environment as much as I can and feel a little better there.
Okay, Kevin, how about you go next, please?
Well, hi everyone. Kevin Kwok dialing in today from Boulder. I've had Parkinson's now for 15 years. I was diagnosed in 2009 at the age of 48. Um, in preparation for today's call, I asked my partner and life partner Jen, was I irritable? And I paid her dearly because she said, "Honey, you don't ever get irritable." But what I really realize is that's not always been the case. I know that I haven't always been the Zen-like, monk. But there's been times in the past where I was really on a hair trigger. And so we'll talk more later about coping. But what I can say is that moods and emotions change over time, and you need to develop skills in turning irritability into just an annoyance, because I do get annoyed.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, we'll talk more about coping and we can share some more details about these experiences as we go. Amber.
Hello, I'm Amber Hesford from El Paso, Texas. I was diagnosed in 2018, had DBS in 2020 or 2021. I don't know, it's all a blur. And here we are. I agree with Shan on the pretty much anything influences my emotions, movies, TV shows. My son will tell you that I'm very emotional, but I've noticed that as of late, it's harder for me. Before, anything would make me cry. A song, a video, a TikTok. I was always in tears. And now it's a lot harder to draw that out. But I'm a lot easier to frustrate lately. So that's fun for everybody around me.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I experience a lot of frustration myself, especially when I drop things. I don't like that. Okay, so Larry, how about you go next, please?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Larry from Toronto, but this week I'm in Quebec City. I'm at a resort. My wife is a personal trainer and she gets a week from time to time, and I'm accompanying her. And it's in a beautiful part of the country. But it seems that this topic is spot on for me this week, because I feel like I'm a case study in today's topics, because I'm noticing a lot of freezing more than usual. And I've become pretty irritated with it, to the point of, wanting to stay in my room to catch up on my work and not engage with anybody. So it's all about how to deal with that. And I've got some tips and tricks that I've learned myself, in the last few hours. So I'm willing to happy to share with everybody on those.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. That's an important. You just said something that's important about this topic. I think that the way that these changes can make you feel like kind of retreating, and that's an important sort of part of this conversation. So let's make sure we don't lose that.
Right.
Okay, Christy.
Christy, you're muted.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christy Lamonica, and I live in Troy, New York, where I teach at Russell State College. And I guess I was diagnosed formally in 2020, and I just had DBS, so I don't really have, well, now I do have a lot of hair. It's really thick. So I just had DBS, but I've really had more symptoms back to 2013 that I can figure out and list them. And I really don't get angry that much anymore. I figure life is too short. Yeah, so I'm not really sure. I'm more relaxed. Things just don't bother me as much anymore.
Yeah, there's a certain flip side to the sort of mood changes that you can experience with Parkinson's, and that may be something that we can talk about as this conversation goes on. That I think there's another impact, which is that you gain a perspective, I think, and I think that's what you're talking about a little bit, Christy.
Yes.
So
And
one
I
thing.
don't really get mad at anything. Sorry, Chris. If I cry or anything, it's always at commercials or any movie that a dog or an animal gets hurt.
Well, I might cry here in a moment. I might cry here in a moment, because the last person to introduce themselves today is going to be Robynn, and Robynn's going to have some news to share with us. So, and that's Robynn is going to be stepping away from the meetup for a little bit, but then I'll let Robynn talk about that a little bit. But I also want Robynn to introduce herself. So, now that I broke the news, I'll let Robynn take it over.
Well, hey everybody, I'm Robynn Morades from Charlotte, North Carolina. Diagnosed in 2015 at the age of 46. Full constellation of symptoms, though, going back to the early 2000s when I was in my early 30s. I had DBS in 2020, and the mood thing going on for me, it doesn't show externally. So it's not a way that I'm interacting with people or anything, but I have different events that happen that throw me into a blind panic inside. It's like a heightened sense of anxiety, and I've got some examples that I'll be able to share. But as Chris mentioned, I do have an announcement. I've spoken with Chris, and after thinking about it for a while, I've decided to step away from the panel for the time being. My cognitive symptoms are getting worse, and I'm having a lot of difficulty toggling back and forth between activities under that executive function kind of piece that we have. So it's getting me to switch gears during the workday. And I have a really cognitively demanding job that requires mental agility and focus and an ability to communicate effectively. And the progression of my symptoms is impacting my effectiveness on the job. So I wrote these notes actually because I just didn't even trust myself to say them. Over these past few months, I have found it increasingly difficult to divide my energies during the day. And so I'm also quitting some national committees that I'm on that are work related, but it's just too hard to toggle back and forth and switch gears. You know, I know that you guys understand in a way that others can't. Someone who doesn't have PD might say something like, well, it's only 1 hour once a month. You can skip lunch, but it's not about the time. It's about the cognitive intrusion and recalibration. And I'm losing my ability to think on my feet or wing it. I even have nightmares about being caught in a situation that in the past I could have just handled with grace and ease as a non-event. And in dreams, when I'm sleeping at night, I start having dreams that I have Parkinson's. And my dreams are much more reflecting the reality of my situation. So I said, as an example, I had to write these comments because I don't trust myself to say what I need to say and what's really in my heart. I really have loved this panel for the last 3 years. I've made some really good friends, not only here, but out in listening land. Hi, Chasm. I saw you put something in the chat early on, but I can't multitask and chat you back. So I'm just saying hi. So I just wanted you guys to know how much I've loved being on the panel and being with you. And I'll tune in to watch you as the panel continues on. We've got some great new members, some new blood. So I wish you guys well, but so today will be my last panel.
As sort of the old timer on this panel, Robynn, I commend you. It takes a lot of courage to understand what your limitations are. And doing what you're doing is really bold. And the other thing I wanted to say is, once you've been a contributor, you're always a contributor.
It's like the mob.
That's right.
You're in, you're never out. That's it. I'm a lifer.
You are a lifer, and so you can't get rid of us.
I don't want to, so that's good.
Yeah, and so on that front, don't if you'd like to reach out to Robynn, you can always reach out to the foundation. We can help facilitate that connection. So don't hesitate to let us know if you have a question that you think Robynn would be the right person to ask. So sorry to volunteer you for that, Robynn, but I trust that that's okay.
Yes.
Yes. Well, yeah, thanks for that, Kevin. It's important to note that it does take courage to do a lot of the things that you have to do with Parkinson's, and this is one of them. So making decisions to prioritize your well-being and to make the most of your life is one of the things about that is involved in living well with Parkinson's, and that's what we're trying to do. So I commend that to Robynn. Thanks for being you about this and being courageous as we know you to be.
Thank you.
So to get into the topic of sort of the mood changes of Parkinson's, I guess I want to say a couple things about mood just generally, because I think it's maybe not necessarily clear what a mood even is. I think, I guess what I want to say is that, certainly depression is a part of mood impacts of Parkinson's, but it's also its own clinical circumstance. So I think we want to we will certainly have room to talk about depression, but I think we want to stay a little bit focused on mood in the sense of, a feeling or a state of mind, or maybe even a kind of tone to the way you approach the world. An atmosphere you might carry with you of maybe cheerfulness or gloominess or, something along those lines. So I just want to sort of set some basic sort of common understanding of what we're talking about. It's about the state of mind and the way we might be feeling, in contrast to the way we might be experiencing something that's clinical, like a depression or something of that nature. Certainly there's overlap, but just to make a clear sort of line there as best we can. So the first question I wanted to ask the panelists is, just generally, do you find that the changes in your mood correspond with fluctuations either in your other symptoms like your tremor or your motor symptoms, or maybe with your medication timing? Does that seem to play a role in when you experience the mood changes you do experience?
Yeah,
Well,
if
I'll
I
chime in.
Yeah, go for it.
I don't take medication, so I can't judge that. But certainly when I have breakthrough tremor, it causes me more sadness. Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm starting to realize that it is dosage related. As best I'm, as I said, especially this week with freezing, because it seems to happen now sort of in between my major dosages. And over the last few months, I've actually been taking less of my medication because I was keeping my exercise above average. But recently I broke my foot playing pickleball. So my exercise has come down. So with the decrease of my medication now, I'm having more freezing. And that impacts on the mood. So I'm basically a case study in going back to my more regular dosages, setting my watch, my alarm to ring at the right time so that I remember to take the second or third dosage, and then some coping skills in between until the mobility comes back. So that's and the mood throughout goes from irritability to frustration, but more or less holds there. Anger and depression were sort of pre and very early after diagnosis. But now it's just the irritability and frustration of not being able to be as mobile as I used to enjoy about 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah, Kevin.
Yeah, Larry brings up a good point. I think we have to balance so many things. There's medication, there's DBS for those that have it if you're optimized. There's sleep, there's nutrition. If all things are going well, then you find that the ups and downs are smaller and easier to manage. If just one of those goes off, oh, that's my med time. If one of them kind of comes out of whack, then you start feeling them. And if 2 or 3 come out, then you really start feeling that the recovery is harder. So I think it's very complex, and we each of us have managed to find our own way to balance all those elements.
Yeah, Les just put in the chat, count my blessings every day helps. And I agree with that 100%. Practice gratitude first thing in the morning to set your mind kind of in that loving kindness towards self first thing in the morning.
Well, and Chris, someone had typed in a question before we started the panel that you sent out, asking about the effect of carbidopa, levodopa on anxiety. And so my anxiety is not caused by carbidopa, levodopa because I'm not taking it, but everybody's reaction to the medicine is so variable. Some people, it makes them anxious. Some people it doesn't. Some people it throws them into a bipolar mania. Some people it doesn't. Some people it helps their tremor. Some people it doesn't. So I would suggest if you think, just like Larry talked about, if you think that you are having symptoms related to medicine, timing or dosage, track it. Keep a journal. You'd be amazed how much we forget. I look at my notes for my movement disorder specialist. I'm like, oh, that's right. I record things real time on my phone because I will forget to report. And so just track it and see for yourself, and then talk to your doctor about it.
Yeah, we're going to need to make sure that somebody on the panel continues to share this point of view that Robynn just shared, because it's something important that Robynn always keeps us on point about, that everybody's experience of these medications is so different. And you really do have to be careful about reporting what your experience is to your physician. And so thanks for that reminder, Robynn. It's, it's important to keep in mind that what you experience with what we say we experience, I guess is what I mean to say, is not necessarily what anybody in the audience might be experiencing. And frankly, we probably all have different experiences on the panel too. Yeah, Christy.
So this is the way that I like to think about depression. So I'm depressed, but I'm not depressed. Okay, so I take an antidepressant and I take an anti-anxiety. I take some both at night. Because if you think about it, if you're not making dopamine right, how does that work with the rest of your system? It probably doesn't. So you're probably low and everything else. And once I started taking this Cymbalta, I felt much better. So make sure you talk to your doctor about these things if anything's bothering you with that, because they can always help. And I use an app to track all my stuff. I'm not sure, can I say the app?
Yeah, go for it.
Strive PD. I keep track of my tremor, keep track of my dyskinesia, and I can use it to keep track of my medication every day. It's pretty cool. So I really like tracking the data with that. And you can have it sent to your movement specialist or anyone that you want once a month. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we actually just published we have a blog post about Strive PD in particular, and we also just published a blog post today, which maybe Danny can throw in the chat, which is about medication adherence and just making how different ways that you can help improve how regularly you or how well you adhere to the plan you develop with your care team. So maybe check that out too. It includes some other apps that can be used to, like Christy was just referring to. So yeah, Amber, I think you just raised your hand.
Yes, so I'm with Doug. I'm on very minimal medication, so I know that my moods are not really impacted by that. But I think Jackie mentioned it in the comments. Hormones are a big factor in my mood.
Yeah.
She's talking about PMS and menopause, and that plays a huge factor. My symptoms are worse, everything's worse, which causes me to be even more irritable. On top of whatever hormone is taking hold of me at that moment, but I feel like that's probably the biggest factor. In general, I try to stay pretty, and no two people are alike with that, so.
But those of us that rely on medication, most of the time your medication is ineffective during that time of the month when your hormones are high or low or whatever during your menstruation time. So it's pretty much a double whammy. It's like, hi, why do I have to deal with this? And why do I have to deal with the PD on top of it?
Yeah, so we actually had a question from the audience that came into us before the webinar started, which was just about how to navigate. This was from a care partner of how to navigate when their person with Parkinson's has these mood fluctuations. So I wonder if maybe we can jump to that question and think about, what can we do to, or how can we have good relationships with people who are sort of maybe affected by the way that our moods may change? Is there anything that you've experienced with a partner or a friend that's been helpful or not helpful? Yeah, go ahead, Robynn.
I would say the number one thing is don't take it personally. It is so not about you. And, I remember reading a study or some conversation, some article one time that when people with Parkinson's have like strong bouts of apathy, it bothers the care partners and the family way, way more than it bothers the person with Parkinson's. And so I think there's sort of a level of acceptance of a new normal that needs to happen within the whole family and the care team, and to not take it personal. My mom was recovering from surgery. This was not related to Parkinson's, but it's a funny example. Trying to have humor amidst all of this shenanigans. And my mom was recovering from surgery, and her older brother was next older brother was taking care of her, and she got really frustrated, and because she was immobile, she just couldn't do anything, and she just cursed loud, she screamed a big curse word, and my uncle went, "Ooh, potty mouth." And it got her laughing so hard. So just try to maintain a sense of humor. I know it's not always easy to do, but it's not about you.
I think another thing I've found is if you have the conversations when it's not a problem, it's easier to address it when it is. So if you're preemptively saying like, hey, when you're in these moods, this is how it affects me. And what are things that I can say to you at that moment? Having an interactive back and forth of, how does your partner want you to approach them, and how can you flag to them that they are impacting you negatively, and how do you want to address that as a couple or as a family, when it happens? It's a whole lot easier to make those plans and think about those things when someone's not upset or not having an issue than in the middle of it.
Yeah, 100%. There's nothing worse than somebody saying, well, snap out of it. You know, you can't snap out of it. You've got to time those conversations accurately. Well said. Yeah.
Yeah, Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, there's sometimes a situation where you're deep in it and you don't realize it. So the conversation of having disclosure, sometimes you're not able to. I remember years ago, I mean, I actually literally chased my family away through bad behaviors and really paranoid behaviors. I mean, the things that would go through my mind back then were so deep and dark that you almost can't come clean with that. I'm happy to say that after DVS and sort of a shift in my life, I'm no longer in that. But if you're not, if you're deep in it, it's really hard to seek help.
Not to change the topic, but really quickly, Jay Johnson put it in the text, a question about amantadine. I took that, in my personal experience, I took amantadine for about 3 years, and it really helped to control my dyskinesia. But eventually my ankles and lower legs swelled up, and I couldn't even get shoes on at one point. And my doctor took me off amantadine and put me on rimantadine, which worked for about 3 years, and then my legs swelled up again. So then I got DBS.
Yeah, so that just to drive home the point that this is Doug's experience, and Doug's not the only person that has had that experience. So it's certainly the case that you have to pay attention to what's happening when you take your medications, whichever medication you take. I want to jump to another question that we had from before the meetup. Somebody sent us a message that was asking, how can you differentiate between Parkinson's related mood changes and irritability and other possible factors that influence mood? This is such a hard question. I don't know that there's a great answer, but I think it's worth talking about. And I want to just start by saying that, and this is maybe related to Christy's sort of flipped perspective from the introduction. And I'll say this. I think I actually have a benefit of I have always had a little bit of tendency to being irritable. And now I definitely notice that it happens more because of my if I'm off time on my medication, or if my symptoms are aggravated and my cognition is maybe a little foggier. And so I sort of find it to be a blessing that I can zero in and say, well, this is clearly about Parkinson's right now. I can't necessarily say as easily when it's not about Parkinson's, but I can definitely tell sometimes when it is. So in a way, it's a blessing of Parkinson's for me that I can say, okay, I can like let this go and say it's not even really about me. It's about what my brain is doing relative to the chemicals that are in there or not in there. So anyway, I wonder if any other panelists have any thoughts about this subject. How do you differentiate between what's related to Parkinson's and what's not?
If it's bad, it's Parkinson's. If it's good, it's not. That's my general take on it. I've decided I will blame all things bad on Parkinson's.
Another blessing of Parkinson's, the scapegoat.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't get irritable all that often. A few years ago, though, I had a situation where I dropped a fork or a spoon in the kitchen, and I got so irritated, and I picked it up and I threw it across the room and yelled a curse word. And my partner was like, "What in the world?" I threw it across the kitchen into the sink. So I jotted it down and I talked to my movement disorder specialist about it, and she just started cracking up. There's a lot to be said for humor. But I want to give an example that I have that's not about irritability, but I know that it is Parkinson's. It seems like externally related, but it's not. I've been organizing conferences in one form or fashion or another for 30 years. I know how to do it with my eyes closed and my hands tied behind my back. And what I do for my work is very rare. There's only about 40 of us in the country who do it. And we were going to have a national meeting, not a big conference, but a national working meeting. And I volunteered to organize it. Well, as part of this process, you have to book a hotel and you have to guarantee a certain number of rooms. And I became frozen in paralysis. I could have guaranteed 5 rooms. I don't have to guarantee 40. But it took me about a month to kind of talk my way through signing this contract with the hotel, because I just got stuck in this loop of paralysis of the uncertainty of how many people are going to come. And that's even having survey monkeys of people saying that they want to come and stuff. But that's an example of the kind of panic, paralysis, frozenness that I get that is anxiety based, although my tremor doesn't show up. It's not like fright. It isn't like that on the external. It's just like a frozen paralysis based in uncertainty. And it's almost like a panic attack inside. And so to me, I know that is definitely Parkinson's, because I'm doing the same things I've always done. That organizing that event wasn't different for me.
This actually sounds a bit like a question we received again from the audience before the meetup, and maybe I'll just read this one because it's a little bit long and it's also maybe a detail that relates to what Robynn just said. The person wrote in and said, about once a month, I completely lose it when I'm alone. Sudden sobs, I can't walk, I can't do much. And then I get these some strange movements that aren't really easy to explain. And it just becomes impossible. And the person is noting that their husband really doesn't deserve that kind of breakdown. And it's hard for them to navigate as a care partner. I guess the question is, what do we do when these really intense experiences happen, where there's this big fluctuation, and then we're in a social situation, maybe? Like, have you any advice as to how to navigate these moments?
Take a breath. I find that meditation, and we've talked about this in previous meetings that we've had, but finding a way to be mindful, even if it's just a 10-minute timeout where you go to a quiet area, really helps a lot.
Yeah, and I guess I would say that, sorry, Doug, I'm just going to jump in real quick and note that that can be confusing to people too. So it might be useful to say in a calmer moment, if you have these sorts of tendencies to really intense emotional changes, it might be useful to talk about that in a moment that's not intense, and say, look, if I have these, I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to go to another room, and just believe it's okay. You know, and don't take that personally as the care partner. And sorry, Doug, I'll go back to you.
I was just going to say a second what Kevin said, taking a break, being mindful. Why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? Breathing. Slowly, you'll get through it.
Jonathan Kabat-Zinn wrote a really great book on mindfulness called Full Chaos Living. And in that book, he talks very scientifically about how meditation works. It really does. It is another form of medication along with exercise.
Yeah, but in a social interaction, could be standing around in a small group, and you sometimes feel that upswell of panic or anxiety in the moment. And you can't step away. What do you do? And what I found is that when that starts to happen, you stop listening to what is being spoken about, and your mind shifts. But what I've tried to do is shift it back to actively listen to what is being spoken about, and if there are questions being asked, to focus on that, because it detracts me away from myself, and I can, then get 1 or 2 seconds to breathe, to calm my breath, take a few breathing in and out, and then being in a better position to get back into the conversation in the moment. Otherwise, I would just put my glass down and disappear, and that obviously is a bit socially awkward because they won't know what I was doing.
I think also learning to meet myself where I am has helped a lot with a ton of this, right? I used to get, if I'm going to have off time, I'm going to get really irritated when I can't move as fast as I want to, or when I'm dropping things, and I found that just being patient with myself and being like, this is where I'm at today and I cannot change that. So how can I meet myself where I'm at? And sometimes that means like, if this was the person I love most in the world, how would I treat them while they were struggling? And that helps me in most of these situations where maybe you're feeling something that turns into frustration or overwhelm. And the more you kind of focus on being overwhelmed or trying to not be overwhelmed, it can just build on itself. And I like what Larry just said. I will often do something like that, pick something to focus on, pick something to listen to really intently, or something I can touch and then focus on how it feels. And just that act of kind of grounding yourself and getting yourself out of your thoughts and kind of into your body and the world around you tends to be pretty helpful for me as well.
Yeah, thanks, Shan. That's important advice, and I appreciate that very much. That's why being gracious with yourself, paying attention to yourself. So I think I want to zoom out and maybe go a direction with that comment and say, getting away from the way Parkinson's might be symptomatically affecting our moods. There's a whole other way that Parkinson's can affect our moods, and that's the way people maybe treat us, or the apprehension we might have about the expense of Parkinson's, or the sort of bad luck, so to speak, of why me, that kind of question. All these different ways that Parkinson's can affect your mood. And I'm wondering if maybe we can talk about some of that. And I think maybe one way to start that conversation would be, it's one of the things that's challenging about living with Parkinson's and that can really affect your mood is the way people will discuss Parkinson's. Sometimes it happened to me the other day where somebody said, "Oh, I hear you had Parkinson's, and well, somebody in my life has this other thing." It's like, well, it's fine. It's not offensive in any overt way, but it is a challenge to know how to approach those sort of conversations where somebody says something that rubs you the wrong way about Parkinson's. And we've talked about this a little bit before, but I wonder if we maybe can talk about that. How do we navigate when people affect us with the way they talk to us about Parkinson's? Any tricks of dealing with those sorts of tough conversations in public or with friends and family?
I'm always willing to disclose that I have DBS to almost anyone and everyone I initially meet. Sometimes they have questions, sometimes they don't. And it doesn't really affect me because I've come to terms with Parkinson's. I'm not afraid to discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes just reminding myself to have generous assumption, right? To assume good intent. And if I just assume that most people are not walking around trying to make me feel like crap, I can be more patient with people, even if they say something that maybe doesn't feel good to me in the moment. If I just assume that they have good intentions, then it's easier for me to roll with it.
Exactly.
This is exactly why every
completely
semester
agree.
when I teach, I go to OT and PT classes and I teach them. I go to I go to the psych classes and I tell them what not to say to people with a chronic illness. And I think that's really important. That I teach them a lot to help with the future of what we have to deal with. It's not, having people tell you that you're too young for Parkinson's. No kidding. What do I say to that? How do I respond? Yeah, I'm too young for Parkinson's. Or my other favorite is, I hope that you get better soon. Yeah, I'm not. My brain is broken. Like, it's not going to get better. I'm sorry. So being really open, I think it helps really, really with my students and everyone around me understanding what I'm going through.
Yeah, thanks for that, Christy. I think that what you're talking about is, in a certain way, when you talk about educating people, you're talking a little bit about advocacy and expanding the people who understand what Parkinson's is. And I think that's an important thing to do. So thanks for doing that work.
No problem. So everyone I meet, they know right away that I have Parkinson's because I'm not afraid to tell everyone.
I'm the same way, and then I share on social media, so I feel like I have to have a certain amount of thick skin to handle that. And I agree with Shannon. I just try to be open and hope that they're not trying to ruin my day with their comments, and just approach it that way. And sometimes when I feel that they are intentional with their rude comments, I kind of give it back, which is maybe immature, but it makes me feel better. So
Makes you feel better. Why
And
not?
this is, Chris, this is an area I'm going to have to learn to navigate, because as I enter this new phase of Parkinson's, whatever it is that's going on, I have remained for about almost 10 years, I guess it's been 9 years since my diagnosis, relatively in the closet. And even though I've had DBS, it's still a very small universe of people who know that I have this. And it's getting to where I can't hide it anymore. I can't camouflage it anymore. And so this is sort of a new realm for me. And I don't know what to expect. It's just, I'm a little bit nervous about it. And I can tell my tendency is to want to make my world smaller so that I don't have to deal with it.
Robin, I think you'll find that your life will actually get better when you open up. I was like you. I served clients and I didn't really want to let people know. And so only a small universe within my world knew about my Parkinson's for the first several years. And it wasn't until I had to go in for DBS, and that's when I became fully visible to everyone. And I came out in a way. But I found that by doing that, you do trade off. You do make a lot of adjustments, but there's this weight that just comes off your chest.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. Just on that point, I mean, my anxiety went way down after I widened my disclosure, because I didn't have to carry that burden of, living a lie to a certain extent, or making excuses for my symptoms. I did feel a tremendous sense of relief once I disclosed, and the response I got was very surprising, because everybody said, "Oh, okay, well, kind of, so what? Now, now what?" I didn't lose my friends. I didn't lose my colleagues. I think they suspected something was up years before. But for me, it was a great sense of relief once I widened my circle and didn't have to perpetuate those, mistruths.
Some reason, once I widened my circle, I ended up with more to do with educating everyone at work and school. Now I go to all the classes, PT, OT, psych, like I mentioned, I go everywhere. So I have more on my calendar now that I've opened up my world to everybody, which is kind of neat. My students, they're really understanding. I also tell them, as a true educator, I tell them everything that's going on with me during the day, so they know. So they know how to treat patients in the future.
Mm-hmm. So I'm at a hotel as I said earlier, in Quebec City, and I just want to quickly show you what I've got with me.
ooh, show and tell.
So to pick up where I about my freezing, I went into a forest and I got the stick, and I'm now walking around the hotel using the stick as a walking stick, but not leaning on it, kicking it in front of me, holding it in front of me and kicking my foot towards it. And now I'm waiting for somebody to ask me, what am I doing? Because not with my irritation, I'll use it as a education requirement, that I'm using this to break my freeze, because guess what? I've got Parkinson's and I'm having difficulty walking. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, so this is sort of something that one of the folks in the audience just put in the chat, which is that Marlo said, "I tell anyone and everyone I have Parkinson's only because I'm self-conscious about my symptoms, and I'd rather get it out there than not." And I feel like that's a way of taking ownership of this, of the situation one's in. And you're describing something very similar. You're taking ownership of how to solve Larry, you are to solve a problem, and also be able to provide a way to converse and connect with other people about the fact that you're living with Parkinson's. So yeah, I need to, you should, I need to, I guess I'll go into the woods and get my own stick.
Larry, I'm super.
Weight class, TOT classes, as that for that method. That's just so brilliant. I love it.
I was going to say the same thing. I'm so impressed with your ingenuity.
I've got to make it to dinner, so I've got to use it.
So I think I want to take a moment and plug, I hope, Kevin, you don't mind me doing this, but I'm going to plug that Kevin recently published an article that I think is worth thinking about in the context of this conversation. And maybe, Kevin, you could describe it a little bit better than I could. But the reason I think it's relevant is that, Kevin was talking about some of the frustrations of the slow progress that we've had with advances in Parkinson's and his perspective on that. And I think that it's related to some of the things that can be hard about Parkinson's with regard to our moods. It's hard to think, of course, many of us, I think most of us, probably everyone that has Parkinson's would, if a cure were available, would be very likely to pursue that cure. And it's a little challenging that we haven't made much more progress towards that. And so I think maybe this might be worth just sharing a little bit about that article, if you're willing, Kevin.
This is a long time coming. I first used to write a blog about personal events that happened, and I made a comment about an FDA meeting that I attended in 2015, and I posted in my Friends of Kevin blog. The acronym for Friends of Kevin were the fucking status update. And so I put that out there. And someone from the FDA actually was copied on that blog. And so what happened more recently was I attended a Michael J. Fox biomarker conference, and we all he called me out and said, Kevin, in that 2015 article, can you describe it? And so it got me reflecting on how little has advanced since that 2015 event. And so I wrote a perspective that was published in Clinical and Translational Sciences. It was, for me, a really great exercise, forcing yourself to actually go through and tracking your progression against other people is what this article talks about, amongst many other things. So thanks for bringing it up, Chris. It's gotten a lot of review and a lot of comments from both clinicians as well as the members of the Parkinson's community.
Yeah, so I thought this was a relevant thing to talk about, partially because of the subject matter, but also because it represents a way of taking action to deal with the challenges you face, and the fact that you were presenting yourself and putting yourself out there as part of how you ended up in these interesting situations. And I hope that other people can, take some sort of inspiration from that and from Larry's sort of physical ingenuity, and just accept that there's ways to move in a progressive and in a productive way with Parkinson's and solve problems and work towards solutions that maybe we don't always think about. So yeah, I just wanted to draw attention to that.
Thanks for bringing it out, Chris.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've spoken about some of the issues, but really with Parkinson's, I've done more in terms of my physicality than I did before I was diagnosed. And I think it's important to look at that as well. I mean, we've spoken about irritability and moods, whatever, but on a positive side, on the exercise, I've run more half marathons with Parkinson's than without. I've cycled furthest, and I've run and swam much more. So there are the benefits as well that come with a diagnosis, which makes you focus on your life each and every day. I mean, we all know our bodies so well. So I know that for me, intense exercise, in my case, has definitely slowed the progression. And what I may be feeling now is the increments of my symptoms because I haven't been exercising as much. So at least I know where to focus on. So there are some, positive things that have come with having Parkinson's as well. And also, patience and living with gratitude and humility and grace.
Yes, it's thanks for mentioning exercise. It's come up in sort of a tangential way a couple of times during this call, but I think it's important to say that for many people, exercise helps to moderate the impacts of mood changes, and maybe it won't be the thing for you, but maybe playing board games is. I mean, you have to pay attention and find the solution for yourself. But I think I share Larry's experience myself that exercise certainly helps stabilize my moods and helps me to certainly deal with my irritability. Although when my legs stop working when I'm in the middle of a fast walk or a run or riding the bike, that can make me even more irritated. So I'm grateful for the stick idea.
I would say that I spend more time paying attention to what I put in my mouth, my body, my mind, how I take care of myself, allowing myself rest, right? Letting myself be silly. I was the most uptight stick in the mud before my diagnosis, but Parkinson's gave me an excuse to look silly in front of other people, and I'll just blame Parkinson's if people judge me, right? It just has I've become a different person and just a little bit more free. And I feel better in a lot of ways than I have the last 5 years before diagnosis, a year after diagnosis. So I agree there's a lot of, now don't get me wrong, there's a lot of really not fun stuff too. It's crap. But because I've shifted my perspective on how I take care of myself and how I let myself be however I am, I feel better mentally maybe than I have maybe ever.
Well, Shan brings up a really important point. I had a friend who got diagnosed with lupus about 2 or 3 years before I got my diagnosis. And we were talking about the fact that people who have a chronic condition who manage it well end up far healthier and more resilient and having better lives in a lot of ways than people who are healthy, who don't pay attention to their physical health, mental health, spiritual health, all those things. And to Larry's point, I agree. I've done more exercise in the last 9 years than in the prior 46 combined.
Yeah, I've said this in previous meetings, but I think I'm a nicer person now than I was before in the heyday of my career. I have a lot more fun, and I'm a lot more playful in a way than I ever was before.
Yeah, I think that we're about the end of our hour, so I think we'll wrap up now. So our next meetup will be September 19th, I believe. We meet every third Thursday, so we'll look forward to seeing everybody there. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll get this recording out in the near future, probably within a couple weeks. And I think Kevin, you're raising your hand, and maybe Christy too.
Yeah, just a quick commercial for one of our compatriots. For those of you who know Todd Vogt, he's competing in the Paralympics. He has Parkinson's, and he's heading to Paris, and his first preliminary heat is on August 30th, so cheer him on.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder, Kevin. And Christy.
I just want to end on something that we didn't mention much of that you want to talk about in the last one, of the why me question, right? Why not me is the converse of the question. Why not me? What did I do? What did I not do? Or what did I do to deserve this is another thing. to think about. So why not me? Why would I wish this on anyone else? So
Yeah,
I
that's
only
a-
have, I
that's
only
a-
have pity party every so often for myself.
That's a cool perspective, especially in the context of what you shared earlier with regard to the outreach efforts you make with the people at your work environment and the connections you make with students. So, yeah, that's a great way to summarize what I was trying to say in a much more elegant way. So, thanks for sharing that. And on that note, we'll say again, thank you for being here, and Robynn, thank you for being a part of this group for so long, and we're gonna miss you very dearly.
So much,
Love you
Rob.
guys.
Thank you.
Love you guys. Thank you.
Love you. Don't
Enjoy.
worry.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.